are thankful to have you join us once again on this Monday morning. What we want to do a bit later on, there's a plan for some folk to be checking in from um, uh, Minnesota and Minneapolis in particular, and so we'll hear from that. Also, prayerful that one and all are safe and sound in this weather that we're having as well. And so we'll get to all of that. Again, our phone number 202-588-0893 is the number to call with your questions and comments. We're going to begin though with Venezuela. And the fact of the matter is there has been a great deal in the news. Part, obviously, of what the fascist regime is doing is flashbanging us every week, every day. We bomb Nigeria on Christmas Day, go after Venezuela a few days later, kill Renee Good, kill Alex Preddy, and all of that, of course, is to overwhelm us and to make it very, very difficult and challenging for us to respond. But respond we must. That is what we must do. So Venezuela is not on the front page anymore. That's part of the plan too. You go, you do what you do, and then you move on to the next thing because it's so overwhelming. But that is ridiculous. We know what happened, and we know we need to deal with it, and we cannot simply forget about it. That's very, very important to understand. And so we want to get back to the issue of Venezuela, hear the issues, get the proper context, and who better to talk to than someone who is a career diplomat. She is a spokesperson for the Afro-Descendant International Cumbe and part of the Bring Them Back movement in Venezuela. And anytime we can talk about these nations from an African descendant perspective, it's important because there's something else they don't want us to acknowledge either. I always remind people, we all love Roberto Clemente in this country. Roberto Clemente said he was a black man. And Dr. King went to visit Roberto Clemente on his farm before he passed away. Also joining us is our dear brother, Obi Egbuna Jr. But first, we want to welcome our sister, Sister Fravia Marquez. Sister Fravia, how are you? Welcome to Make It Plain.
Fine, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today.
Good morning to you, and brother Obi. Good morning to you as well, brother Obi. Obi wears so many hats. I didn't know which one. I didn't get to ask you which hat you're wearing today. So tell us, brother Obi, which hat can we put upon you today in the context of this conversation?
In this conversation, two of them, External Relations Officer of the Zimbabwe Cuba Friendship Association and co-founder of the Shirley Graham Du Bois William Worthy Media and Friendship Collective. But in this case, you're a brother of nearly 40 years.
Well, no, because I'm only 30, so that's not that can't be true. So you are in your 40s and 50s. First of all, Sister Fravia, let's begin with you. Where are you these days, and in what proximity to Venezuela are you?
I'm in the capital, actually. I'm in Caracas.
Okay.
I reside here.
And were you there when the kidnapping, invasion, etc., happened?
Yes, I was. I was at home with my family, and yes, we were all together.
And so describe, if you would, that experience and what that was like in the moments that happened. I've talked to others, and they spoke about how fearful they were and just how traumatic it was. That hasn't really been talked about much from a everyday person's perspective, because we don't all the Western media don't like to focus on everyday normal human beings and citizens. So we'd love to hear about that, if you would.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, of course. Well, it was a shocking moment for the whole population. We were not expecting this kind of attack, a military attack, because as you all know, South America is an area of peace since forever, since the last wars of independence. So we really didn't believe, I guess, this would happen. But on the other hand, population, since Venezuelan citizens were getting ready for something like this, but I think not in this asymmetric way.
Mm.
People was getting ready to be able to have communications in case something happens, community radios. Some people wanted to get trained, civilians of every age, young and not that young also. But this took us all by surprise. It was almost like a nightmare movie. We couldn't believe, we didn't know what was going on. People at the beginning believed it was maybe it's raining. What are those? Are airplanes? I can't believe we're being bombed. They bomb not only military places, they also bomb schools, one school and one research scientific center, and of course a civilian building. Thanks God we didn't have massive death, but of course we did have losses of civilians, putting aside from the militaries. And trauma is the biggest war we have right now. People didn't know if the president was alive, if the congresswoman, first lady, was alive, and even the son of the president, who is also a congressman just re-elected, we didn't know where he was until after noon. And the worst way to find out was through social of Mr. Trump saying that he had it, but we didn't know if that was true. So I can tell you that it was very amazing for me to see how much politically we have grown as citizens, because in a situation like this, being the first time this ever happens in Venezuela, you would say people would get to the streets crazy, screaming, maybe being violent, maybe, getting to the stores to crash windows, or, desperation. And that didn't happen. It was the most amazing silence I have ever heard on the streets of any capital. People
Mm.
was silent, in shock, on TV, trying to find out what was going on. And then after we received the official news from our leadership, from the vice president saying that the president had been taken and she was requesting a proof he was alive, and that happened on TV, on national TV. Some people scream, for instance, around my neighborhood. I'm not that close from the places where the bombings were. And one lady screamed just like, we know you took them. We won't like the US and we will bring them back. So, and that's all. No one answered to her. No one contested what she said. We were in shock. And I think we're still in shock.
Mm.
It's like we are coming slowly back to normal. People is on the street every day protesting and marching, asking for the return of President and First Lady. People has been to the UN headquarters in Caracas, delivering a letter to the coordinator of the UN here to request his intervention. The workers, the women, the youth, the Afro-descendants, and especially because Afro-descendants were the majority in Venezuela, 58% of the population. And we were involved in every step of what happened. People went to the street nearby Miraflores that morning around 10 a.m. to look for the president. What is next? We need to defend, our homeland. Waiting, in shock, but without fear, because we won't be back to be a colony. We won't come back to that. So it has been a very unique moment for us, to say the least.
Obviously, it most certainly has. And what we're hearing from you is not what we hear here. And the perception here is obviously there are Venezuelans in the street um, celebrating the capture,
Not
the
in
kidnapping.
Caracas.
And
No.
you're saying that's not the case there at all. And so what is the citizenry saying now about those in power and the function? I mean, this is a country. It has to function. They have services that have to be. People forget that. Y'all running around today wondering who's gonna pick up the snow. There's service. People have to pick up the trash and carry out services in Venezuela too. This is not just some place that folks are just running amok, and nothing's going on. What is it? How are people engaging with the government services, and are people protesting still for answers even now?
Yes, people keep protesting in every way. And even though the attack was in Caracas, our nearby state, La Guaira, which is to the northern part, the coast with the Caribbean, and Miranda, which is very close to Caracas, it was not on the whole country. The whole country has been having public talks, conversation, greeting the son of the president. He has been traveling outside Caracas to meet with people, to assure them that because people was asking, are they okay? Are they being tortured in the U.S. like they did to our diplomat Alex Saab in the past? What is going on? We knew um, they were trying to get to a point in history, fabricating, you know, facts, so-called facts, the narco trafficking narrative to be able to justify something like this. But it's not. It's a very weak case. So people, the common citizen in Venezuela, is worried about when is he coming back? We think he will be back. We are doing everything to keep the memory alive and to show him, even by writing letters and postcards, sending to the prison the way we can, that we are here and we won't forget. As I said at the beginning, we Venezuelans, we have been living these kind of attacks from the US since years ago. We have survived several attempt coup d'etats. Last one in 2020 with mercenaries coming through our coast. And it was our Afro-descendant population who stopped them, common citizens, not military. And they were able to stop them. They went to Yale. I'm talking about John Woodrow and this silver cup. All this is already officially in the media because due to a prisoner's change, this guy, this mercenary, former Green Beret, is now back in the U.S. and he's facing charges in the U.S. because, of course, he was left out. Like no one hired him in the first time of President Trump to try to make a coup d'etat. What I'm trying to say is we are people of peace. We won't get crazy to the streets, which is kind of the strategy that the US and other imperialistic countries are trying to always do when they want to create instability and throw government. We know we're very smart and we're very disciplined, so we listen. So we need to continue in peace because we need to negotiate like with a firearm to our heads. It's not the head of the vice president or the leadership. It's all the Venezuelans because whatever we do wrong, our president and the first lady will pay for that. He is a hostage. He was kidnapped. It's more than being in prison. And we know the case is so weak that the DOJ had to drop. Just the next day they arrived in New York, they had to drop before the first audience the charge calling the Cartel de los Soles, which we said so many times was not an organization, that it didn't exist, and it was a blatant lie. So there's no way they can prove in court the president is the chief of any narco trafficking organization who was involved in that, but that was the way they tried to portray it, to explain to the US citizens who are spending all this amount of money in the Caribbean, who are killing innocent people in their boats in the Caribbean. They are still doing it. 3 days ago, they killed another person. First time one survivor was rescued on the Pacific Ocean without any proof of anything, not even before or after.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And to that point, the cartel, which was one of the charges they had to withdraw, people began on social media to post the old clip of 60 Minutes saying that cartel, Cartel de los Soles, was actually one that was created and administered by the CIA, right? And now we don't have 60 Minutes anymore because right-wing Barry Weiss, Trump's allies, taking it over, and then, so that type of accountability is gone. Let me ask you one more question. I want to bring Obi in. The 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 characterization of Maduro in terms of mainstream corporate media up north here is that he is a terrible leader, um, a bad guy, a thug, and all of that. Are you saying to us that the people of Venezuela were happy with his leadership and saw him? Because the other thing, Machado was saying he's not legitimate. And giving away Nobel Peace Prizes, which you really aren't supposed to give away. If that was the case, we'd all just go get one and buy one. But are you saying that none of that is actually true, and that many Venezuelans saw him or see him as their legitimately elected leader?
Yes, as a matter of fact, in the last election, the only way the opposition and the US could rig the election was by a massive cyber attack on our electoral system that for years, for more than 20 elections of different levels, we have had since 2000. It has been recognized even by the Carter Center. So the only way to, try to bring uncertainty nationally and internationally was to break with the always with the custom we always have in Venezuela to receive the result of the elections the same night by midnight. It didn't take days, never. We knew what was going on. But this past year, what happened was that they were hijacking our electoral system and very conveniently having part of the so-called receipts of the voting machines in several places. So they started to build up for these trying to bring civil unrest that never arrived, thanks God, to us, but contesting the election outside. They always try to portray this bad image. It's like when this clown Juan Guaido declared himself president in 2019. He was barely little known by Venezuelans. He was a recent congressman, just recently elected, and the US decided he was the one. And Trump won, took it to the White House, took it to the State of the Union address. And what was that? Like the government of Wikipedia. So they play with the mainstream media. They try to portray bad leaderships, but Venezuela was actually growing economically in 2022. Inter-American Development Bank recognized it was the fast growing economy in South America with 5%. We have more than 900 sanctions, and these sanctions affect every area of Venezuela. They said, no, those are targeted sanctions for this and that. But then you have the overcompliance. So even to bring medicines that, by the way, they bomb containers with medicines and medicines for dialysis also on January 3. So even to bring medicines, it was super more expensive and a nightmare because people wouldn't like to lose their business with the US or other countries by selling to Venezuela. So President Maduro is a man of the people. He was a bus driver. He is a union leader. He's a father. He's a grandfather. He always came with the family, reachable by people. Is not a distant figure. And, the demonizing of the media has been working for years, trying to portray him like that.
That is, I'm okay. There you go. I couldn't hear myself. That is exactly the case. The demonization. Fravia Marquez with us, an activist, a leader. I'm coming back to you, but first of all, Obi Egbuna Jr. also here with us. Obi is for a long time been a liaison with the government of Cuba and Africans here in America. Obi, what's your take? And you have been hosting our dear sister Fravia on many occasions before the media. So you also have sort of a cumulative perspective on what's going on down there. Talk to us about that, if you would.
Yes, of course, I don't want to, it's hard to come behind Fravia because our main focus, first of all, thank you, you're dependable as usual, for giving Fravia this platform and the Venezuelans, because those of us in solidarity and camaraderie with them, we should be giving them platforms right now so that whatever we do to assist and fight with them side by side, we're listening to them give their recommendations to ensure
Yeah.
that we're maximizing potential. So thank you so much for that. Last night we were together and she brought up an awesome point that the diplomatic hostility intensified against Venezuela when the late President Chavez broke ties with Israel. And when you think about that, we know that a lot of times when we look at the blockade on Cuba, we don't talk about the role of Israel being one of the only other countries in favor of the maintenance of that. But when she left the meeting we were in last night, I remembered something, Brother Matsamela, and I believe you and I had this conversation both privately and in a public platform. Venezuela did the unthinkable in 2003. Comandante Chavez gave former Zimbabwean president, the Pan African giant and icon, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, the Bolivar Award, the highest honor in Venezuela, which is patterned after Cuba's Martí Award. And this is right after the land reclamation program started in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe directing Namibia and Mozambique and Angola in preventing the United States from reinvading the Congo in 1999. Susan Rice's coming out party, if you will. So Venezuela has a socialist revolution without question, and they make no apologies for it. But the nationalist and Pan Africanist character of their revolution makes them very appealing. This is a country, when Fravia talks about Cumbe International, understand what that means. These are people who are saying they're not Black American, they're not African American, they're not Afro Caribbean, they're not Afro Latino, they are African descendants. Put that in the context of 1962, when the Bay of Pigs invasion failed on Cuba and they imposed sanctions. They said Cuba is not a threat just because of its ability to maintain its direction, but the influence they give others. When you
Mm.
see how quickly the US deposed of Allende in Chile in 73, how they invaded Grenada in 83 and assassinated Maurice Bishop, how they introduced our community into crack cocaine to overthrow the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. So conjure up, and that is the reason why media has deliberately had all the images of President Maduro in custody after being kidnapped. You see the DEA behind it. That is to send a message. And 2 years ago, we had Fravia, Sister Fravia, and the Nicaraguan ambassador to the United States at the time, Lorenzo Andino, Anton White, the youngest man convicted as a kingpin for crack cocaine in US history at the age of 20. His co-defendant Eric Hicks, Freeway Rick Ross, and we had them next to Fravia, the Nicaraguan government, Africans in Honduras, Colombia, and Mexico. It was the first people to people's encounter dealing with drugs and gun violence on a hemispheric level. While you were in Durban 25 years ago, Brother Matsamela, dealing with the United Nations Conference on Racism, Xenophobia, and other related intolerances, some of us strategically went to El Salvador because that's when the Bush administration talked about Plan Colombia. And
Mm.
this was a mission under the auspices of fighting drugs and guns, but they were actually taking the next phase in their efforts to militarize and weaponize the Americas. Back to the sanctions. President Obama introduced these sanctions, but that was consistent. And the sanctions on Venezuela are modeled after the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act of 2001. If you go back and look at the methodology, if you go back and look at how they use the word targeted and what have you. And when President Obama imposed these sanctions, It goes back, people forget his words during his first inauguration. He said, the might of our military must be matched by the strength of our diplomacy. So that sanctioning on Venezuela made them vulnerable to the military invasion and the military attack. Bernie Sanders attacked President Maduro in 2019. Bernie Sanders also voted in favor of the sanctions on Zimbabwe when he was a congressman in Vermont.
Hmm.
So we say that to take this out of the realm, people who look at life through the lens of the what we call the never-ending lovers quarrel between Democrats and Republicans. But we can show you consistently that when it comes to regime change, especially in the Americas, because and then the sanctions of Venezuela were pushed through by Menendez. And I challenge anyone to distinguish Bob Menendez from Marco Rubio. Menendez, who wanted Assata Shakur extradited from Cuba. So, this whole question, and of course, we're saluting all week long the 32 Cuban combatants who lost their life defending President Maduro. They are being honored all over the world. And so, this week, Sister
And to
Fravia,
be clear, Obi, what were they? Were they bodyguards? Is that they?
secure they were security, they were bodyguards, they were part of the they were part of the military. So in addition to Cuba and Venezuela shocking the world with their collaboration on their effort to eradicate glaucoma in the Americas, Operation Project Miracle, which we'll be dealing with on Sunday, Cuba helped them in every way possible. But Venezuela, the Venezuelan revolution is 25 years old. And when you put that in the context of world revolution, Lumumba lasted 6 months in the Congo. Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah lasted 9 years. Modibo Keita in Mali, who died in prison after being removed by the CIA, he lasted 7. Ben Bella in Algeria lasted 4. So the fact that in the enemy's backyard they have maintained their revolution, and the other thing too is on the 7th of December, President Maduro organized a meeting with 66,000 union leaders, one of the biggest assemblings of union leaders. Why is that important? Because the CIA has always used the international branch of the AFL-CIO, the International Labor Solidarity Center, to infiltrate movements and nations in the Americas. So even though they're an independent entity now, and I think they're about to be dissolved, but however, the methodology is in play. So President Maduro understood this. When you look at the former Vice President Mike Pence trying to get Venezuela removed from the Organization of American States, the kidnapping of Alex Saab, and by the way, in terms of who President Maduro is, he's Phyllis Wheatley, kidnapped at 7 years old when Senegal and Gambia were the same place. He is Elian Gonzalez, kidnapped as a 5 year old 26 years ago. And of course, all of our ancestors, for that matter, who were put on captivity vessels known as slave ships. So that's who he is. And we stand by him, we stand with them, and we're going to continue to keep working with them using media, organizing, and the initiatives that they've come up with. President Maduro and President Diaz Canel of Cuba we're talking about an agricultural empowerment campaign. This is at the same time that Captain Traore in Burkina Faso is talking about it. This is at
Right.
the same time that Southern Africa has doubled down on their commitment. And right here in Brandywine and Upper Marlboro, we're going to be training children in agriculture. And at the end of the year, we're going to have an all African Children's Agro Expo with all those nations we mentioned in conjunction. Um,
Right.
Education. You met Ambassador Chucho Garcia Matsamela 9 years ago in Selma when we brought him there to address the civil rights community there. So we're going to organize a meeting at the end of March, bringing together all our museums, all our cultural centers, all our bookstores. And Venezuela has no one has pushed the African personality stronger, more aggressively, more militantly than Venezuela. And as she gave you the breakdown, Venezuela is Southside Chicago. Venezuela is Southeast DC, depending on where you are.
Right. Yeah. No,
So Venezuela is Chocolate City. So,
yeah.
and lastly,
And and
this is
and
all I have to
Venezuela
say.
is Minneapolis. I want to do this in the interest of time though.
Okay.
And I'll come back to you in a minute, because I have you expound on what the question I'm asking Fravia. Sister Fravia, talk to us more about Afro descendancy in a country like Venezuela. You're doing that. That's not talked about enough. We still tend to think of these countries in Latin America and in Brazil and in the Caribbean as something other than African, as as if, not to mention indigenous. And by the way, we will one of our indigenous brothers from Minneapolis may join us shortly to give us an update. But um, as if these current formations of nation states just came to be, not that they were developed by African people and indigenous people first as the first people there. What's the spirit like there in that regard? Is there an embrace of
First, yes.
Afro descendancy in the main and across the board? Because we know the folk come here to Florida and they're discouraged. We don't do that. We're not black. So what is it like there at home?
Yes, well, in Venezuela, we had an Afro-descendant movement forming since the 80s. As Brother Obi mentioned, Chucho Garcia, Ambassador Jesus Garcia, was one of the main leaders, figures, researcher, historian, and activist, Venezuelan, and the Afro-descendant issues. And he participated in Durban when we were able to bring this new concept of Afro-descendancy. But in Venezuela, as most of the majority of the countries in Latin America, we were fed this concept of there's no racism, we are mestizos or mestizaje, and we are all equal, and it's about social difference, but not race difference. And, that was the way to sell civil rights movements to Latin America after the 50s and the 60s, after the 60s in the US. So what people would tell you before Chavez specifically, and I'm talking about general knowledge, not the specific groups that were struggling since the 80s. After the 2000, what before 2000, what common people in Venezuela will tell you is no, we are not like the US. We never chase blacks. We are all equal. I call you black or negrita just because out of love. And, they didn't recognize that racism. Even we had, still have some, but we had more endo-racism among our Afro-descendant communities. We went there, with the straightening the hair, rejecting our bodies, rejecting our culture. But we inherited at the same time a great amount of culture in language, in music, in food from African descent, especially from Benin and Angola, we know now. In certain areas of the countries, even very close to the capital, like in Miranda State, in Aragua State, we still know and use words that come from our ancestors. So after Chavez recognized himself as an Afro descendant, he was the first president and the only one until now recognizing himself as an Afro descendant. The subject was put over on the table, and that was craziness in our society because people said that issue was not an issue until he bring him up. There was no racism. We were so happy. Oh yes, but why the poverty? The majority on the jails, and the people that couldn't read, that was not receiving enough food, were all brown and darker colors. Is that a coincidence? It's not. It's because the policies were racist. As a diplomat, I was able to bring this issue to my Ministry of Foreign Affairs in one of the speech, and I challenged them to look in history. We did have a racist policy to bring Italians, Spaniards, and Europeans into Venezuela in the 50s, because we had this belief that went to our consulates abroad saying that we needed to improve the race. So we were favoring them to come. And if you had a child with a Venezuelan woman or with a Venezuelan man, you instantly would have the citizenship. How do you call that? That is trying to whiten the society. And we were rejecting Arabs and Chinese immigration. And a lot of people does not know that was laws that we had for our foreign affairs consulate. in written, that was silent. So in Venezuela, we used to have a silent racism, which is worse than having an open one, I think, because you go into that game without knowing you are being excluded. Then you are part of that racial profiling in every day of your life. So after President Chavez declared himself Afro-descendant, these movements were able to bring knowledge, to start educating and empowering our people, not only the youth, but also, the adults. And after we started this great moment in our Afro history to rescue our Afro heroes in our independence, to put them in the books. So to put them in the pantheon where we have independence heroes who were in the majority white people, to rescue that we are not only about music, drums, and sport, that we gave more and still giving more to our society in every area, and also to count ourselves for the first time in the census of 2011. That's why I'm telling you we're 58%, and I'm sure we are more, but it will take more education to get the people recognize himself as an Afro-descendant and empowering your roots, but we keep moving forward. And as Brother Ovi mentioned, we celebrated these international congresses, especially in 2019, to try to bring people into Venezuela to see the reality for in their own, in their own perspective with their own eyes, because this clown declared himself president, and outside Venezuela, they believe he was in charge. So we had a big summit, international summit of Africans and Afro-descendants in Caracas in November 2019. And that's where International Cumbe for Afro-descendants, which is anti-imperialistic, was born. We received representatives for more than 90 countries, including Africa, Europe, the US, and of course, Latin America and the Caribbean. And we sat down to design a plan to move forward in the common causes, because at the end we all have the same problems, just in different places and different languages.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And Obi, I want you to talk about too Hugo Chavez. I remember that him declaring himself Afro descendant, as did Fidel Castro. I want you to talk about that. Before I do, I always like, and I know Obi will appreciate this too. We always have to put stuff where people can get it. Now, I mentioned Roberto Clemente. In 71, the Pittsburgh Pirates fielded what was called the first all-black baseball team on the field, 9 black players, right? Since that time, it has changed. It's no longer, it's black and Latino, and that's fine. But it shows you how the effort back then, in those days, it was no delineation. Black, Afro Latino. Now for we got it. Now it wasn't really, everybody wasn't really black marked. They were, black and Latino. But I'm just showing that you all to see how this evolves and the struggle that we're up against to do something about these delineations and these lines. And while we're talking about Venezuela, this is a nation of African people. It's not what Trump wants you to think that it is. All right. And y'all need to stop listening to man killing white folks now. So, we got to understand that. Really, really. I was telling people that if you ever want to amuse yourself, listen to the LBJ tapes. He told Dr. King, I got Civil Rights Act, Dr. King in 64. I can't do a Voting Rights Act a year later. Then people in Alabama killed James Reed and Viola Uzo and others. And George Wallace said, you can't do this to me. And LBJ said, yeah, but you're killing white folks. Now, we are in a moment of madness. And I don't want Venezuela, Fravia, and Obi to come out ahead. It's whatever the news cycle. The news cycle ain't even 24 hours no more. It's 3 hours. I'm not even looking at the news. Something might have happened just now. ICE might have killed somebody today. Let me get on Twitter and see. Obi, talk to us about the importance of Afro descendancy. And I just want you to tap that historical point. Hugo Chavez, Afro descendant.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all remember our brother Hugo Chavez stood in the UN after Bush and said, I can still smell. See, people think Trump is some of us, I'm not old enough to remember Reagan, Obi is, But some of y'all are old enough to remember Reagan, and George W. Bush. I was just a child then. But these were people. These were bad actors, literally, before Trump. MAGA was Reagan's slogan. But talk to us, Ob, about that relationship between Cuba, Fidel Castro, Afro-descendancy, Hugo Chavez, and Afro-descendancy, if you would, please.
Okay, well, President Chavez took it a step further. He said he was African. He'll let people say they're Afro descendants to catch up to the full identity. And that's why we were saying it was so special because remember, when he embraced Zimbabwe, not one member of the Black Caucus voted against those sanctions. Only 4 abstained, but they almost unanimously voted in those sanctions. So for him to do that at that particular time, his role during the African South American summits, talking about what Venezuela was doing, the initiative to provide heat and air conditioning to poor families in the Bronx when they had control of Citgo.
Right.
So they were covering all bases. And I had the honor of co-producing 3 music albums with Mutulu Olubala, affectionately known as M1 of the internationally acclaimed hip hop group Dead Prez. Thanks to Sister Fravia, the #1 hip hop group in Venezuela, Bituaya, gave us 3 songs. They claim to be Yoruba. So when we talk about the Santeria Yoruba culture in Cuba, it also filled into Venezuela. And the 26 years ago at the Organization of Caribbean Latin American Youth in Cuba, Comandante Fidel Castro said the kidnapping of Elian Gonzalez resulted in people, the average US citizen, learning more in 4 months about Cuba than they have in 41 years. The average US citizen has learned more about Venezuela in the last month than they have the last 100. And that is very important because you know this, Matsanella. We have a tendency to treat Cuba, Venezuela, and Puerto Rico because they're Spanish speaking like they're not part of the Caribbean. That's the equivalent of saying Egypt, Morocco, and Libya and Algeria are not part of the African continent because of the Arab occupied north. No, 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 no. So this has made, and it's going to make Venezuela appealing. When people find out they have free education, when people find out they have free healthcare, when people find out how they model their nation and how embracing they are of their African identity, that's going to make them more appealing. So in these meetings we're having, we're not only looking at what people can do to stand with them, but because they maintain their people, their ministries, and their commitment to people relations, more nation, more. The other day, I wrote Maulana Karenga a letter asking for an 8th principle in Kwanzaa that deals with liberation and organized resistance, dedicated to Kwame Ture. We've started conversations where
And
we're going to
Obi
have.
told me about that, y'all. I told him I'd have been scared to do that. I wouldn't do that, Dr. Kareem. He did it.
So we're
That wasn't me,
having
Dr. Kareem. I didn't give him that idea. That's
okay. No, he knows. So we're going to have all the African independent schools in front of Cuba and Venezuela to talk about a memorandum of understanding. Like we said, all of our communities that are in DC, 1 out of 5 children go to bed without food. So agriculture in the urban center, as well as reintroducing it to children in the rural center. Thanks to Fravia and Ambassador Chucho Garcia, this is going to shock you, Manzanella, because of their commitment to what they call African epistemology. My father's dissertation was on the role of literature and epistemology in the decolonization process. Ambassador Garcia got that put in the archives of the University of Caracas. Fravia was collecting books from us. It started with the book about Booker T. Washington by Dr. Tyreen Wright. And they're translating books in Spanish so African children can read them. This is one of the campaigns that they were on. So we're tapping them back into bookstores in our community so that process can be reignited.
right.
Right. So they are all type of people to people initiatives that are going to be intensified as a result of this aggression. So whether we're talking about the National Guard in DC, Memphis or Chicago, Cop City in Atlanta, what's going on in Minneapolis, the decision to deal with fascism is only going to intensify our resistance. So we welcome the challenge because that's one of the most beautiful characteristics of history itself, the challenges it imposes on the historical moment. So we
No
stand
question.
with Venezuela.
Yeah, no question about it. And I always appreciate our brother Obi keeping our international perspective. We a lot of times they like to confine us as African people only to whatever our local situation is. And throughout history, the Malcolm X's, the Du Bois's, the Garveys, and even the book I had on the other day with Dr. Levitt for King Day, Beyond Borders, Dr. King's Pan-Africanism, breaking outside of the boundaries of a local geographic location is always a challenge. And so that's the lane our brother Obi has always been in. And he inspires and
Thank
holds us accountable to that. Y'all got to be broader. We live in a universe. As a matter of fact, let me just also lift up the name of our newest ancestor, Dr. Charles Finch, speaking of universe, who wrote the textbook on the African universe, at the African creation of science and technology and the study of the universe. We are not just on this block. Many of us spend most of our lives as Black folk. I would dare say even those who are struggling in Venezuela, being born and going to school and working and living and dying within the same 10-block radius. But our minds, what Brother Obi's been trying to tell us for the many years he's been out here, much longer than me, our minds have to expand. We are a people of the world. I am an Afro-Venezuelan just by virtue of my DNA. Just because I don't go somewhere and have visited doesn't mean I'm not who I am. And the same for our sister Fravia. There's no space between me and this dear sister. All right. And the work that she's doing. Chase Iron Eyes, who's an attorney in Minneapolis representing the indigenous people who ICE and Customs and Border Patrol ain't even supposed to be on the street, y'all, by the way. It's supposed to be on the border. They're not just coming, they're not just arresting Spanish speaking people and killing white folk in Minneapolis. They are rounding up indigenous people as well. So I believe he's in court, as is Big Indian Jossie, our brother, so they may not be able to join us. So in the moments remaining, Sister Fravia, what assignment would you give the audience? I've never been I've never liked talk radio. I like do radio. So tell us what's next for the movement there, and are there any ways you would enlist our and the public support?
Well, it is what you just said. It was so powerful. You empower us with that. And I was mentioning this last night in this other interview. It's like we need to understand we are all in this together. What happened to Venezuela is not only Venezuela, it's a geopolitical situation that will open. They did it because they think it will open better spaces for them to maneuver around the world, but it also will bring consequences all over, political, social. It's time to open our eyes and understand we are the same. We are in the same struggle. And let's go back to the basics. What is the basic? Human rights, equality, peace. The right to be in peace, the right to have education, the right to have food. It's like it is very, for me, I live in the US because I worked there, as Brother Obi mentioned, at the embassy. And first, I can tell you that, as you said, there's no space between you and me. It was very eyes opening for me to get there and realize that my brothers and sisters, Afro Americans, just smiled back at me when I entered to a store. Even they didn't even know if I speak English or no, if I was Brazilian Dominican, because they never believed I was Venezuelan because the way of the country has been portrayed. But
Right.
they were automatically in solidarity. It was like so polite, so even caring. We have closeness. We need to understand that. We need to um, be able to break those obstacles. They have been trying to put us with these divisions because of religions, because of you were born here, there, different language barrier, and come together. Maybe this sounds like very romantic or, utopia, but in reality is what we are doing. It is what this system is trying to pull us apart all the time. For instance, I remember when I was there, I think it was Obama's time or before. Latinos, we were the enemy of the moment because we were taking all the jobs from the African Americans. So they tried to separate us. Every day you could read in the newspapers how Latinos we were robbing the space, the income, the salary, and the benefits of the African American community in particular. Why? Because we are alike. So they have to put out their ideas to divide us, to make us afraid of each other. And the fact is that we have the same origin. We come from the same history of mistreating our society, trying to bring down and separate our families, trying to make us ashamed of ourselves, of our nature, like trying to disempower all the time. So the best way we can move forward is like trying to at least question what the media is saying, trying to see the equalness or what is common between my brother. Uh, we are not in bubbles anymore. Social media, if not the best tool, is a tool to get to know the others, to get to see we're asking for the same things in different places. We're suffering same struggles. And at the end, if we're not suffering now, maybe eventually we will be suffering in the future. Like this story about the farm, no? If they come for me in the night, they will come for you in the morning. So
That's right. That's right. That's right. Very, very quickly, I just want to be clear. The current regime in power, successors to Maduro, and it looked
mhm,
kind of like they might have been in on it. That's how they got to Maduro so quickly.
mhm.
Do we trust them? I mean, is it, in other words, is the CIA working with those people or having a hidden hand in the current situation? Do we know?
Of course. Yeah, well,
Okay.
CIA just like, let me say, just like they has been always there. It was officially recognized by President Trump. If he announced CIA was coming to Venezuela, that he gave permission, to do this. And there are stories saying that it was because CIA was involved against Marcos Rubio's plan to obliterate the leadership in Venezuela, that at the end we didn't have more bloodshed because the CIA make them unbelievably think that we will be another Gaza, God forbidden, in South America. And if what was important for the administration is the cash flow, the resources, you cannot get out the cash and the resources with this complete instability in the political government. So
Yeah. Yeah.
they were responsible partially of framing this in some way. Of course, we really don't know that they could keep off, like, sabotaging and with a pistol to our heads, as we said, because they took the president and the first lady and they are alive. So it's like, if you do anything, we will kill you. If you do this, they are all the time menacing with violence, even with bombing again, if they don't follow part of what they ask. So it's a very
Right.
difficult situation. I don't know.
Yeah, no, no, that's important to understand, and we can do a whole show on the oil. Even the oil people are like, we didn't ask you to do that. They told him that in the thing. You're out of control, Trump. Fravia, our dear sister, has been with us, and we so appreciate her. I'm afraid our time is up. We will do this again. We want to call on you again to give us updates from a very real perspective, y'all. Many of our ancestors stopped there before they came here. So when these foundational Black Americans want to debate with me, so y'all don't want to acknowledge that. But I tell them to debate with Obi. They scared of Obi. When they call me, want to debate me, and said, I'm gonna sick Obi on y'all, then they don't want to talk about it no more. Fravia Marquez, we appreciate you. Obi Egbuna, as always, appreciate you, brother. And
Thank you, thank you.
we will talk again. We thank you
Thank
all
you.
for
Yes,
joining us on MIP
we'll talk.
89.3. It has
Thank you.
Thank you.
been made plain.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.